7 times small-town America became a living nightmare. There's a reason people say small towns are safe. Everyone knows everyone. Doors stay unlocked. Children play in the streets until the streetlights flicker on. Secrets stay buried under polite smiles and Sunday morning church services. But that safety is an illusion. Because when something goes wrong in a small town, it doesn't just break the peace. It shatters reality itself. The tight-knit fabric that holds these communities together becomes a trap. A fishbowl where everyone watches, everyone whispers, and no one can escape. Welcome to Plain Sight Docs. Today, we're taking you to 7 American towns where the impossible happened. So if you've ever wondered what happens when a town's sense of safety is ripped away by something that borders on the impossible, you're about to find out. These are 7 times small-town America became a living nightmare. Let's begin. The Phantom Rider of Circleville. Circleville, Ohio. A quiet Midwestern town nestled in Pickaway County, about 30 miles south of Columbus, with a population of about 13,000. The kind of place where Friday night football games pack the bleachers, where the downtown still has a working courthouse square, and where everyone knows your name, your business, and apparently, your deepest secrets. In March 1976, the mailboxes of Circleville started delivering something far worse than bills or grocery store circulars. Anonymous letters, typed on a manual typewriter, meticulously detailed, coldly menacing. And they knew everything. The first wave of recipients were ordinary citizens. A school bus driver named Mary Gillespie, her husband Ron, who worked at the local Anheuser-Busch plant. The Pickaway County School Superintendent, Gordon Massey. These weren't vague threats or random harassment. The writer knew intimate, private details about their lives. Affairs, real or imagined. Private conversations, daily routines, things that should have been locked away in the privacy of bedrooms and whispered phone calls. Mary Gillespie opened her mailbox one spring afternoon and found a letter that made her blood run cold. It accused her of having an affair with Gordon Massey, the school superintendent. But it wasn't just an accusation. It was a dossier. The letter described alleged meetings between Mary and Gordon in chilling specificity. Locations where they supposedly met, times of day, what they wore, the color of Mary's car, the route she took on her school bus. Details that felt invasive, violating. True, even when they weren't. Mary insisted she wasn't having an affair. Her husband Ron believed her. But the letter contained just enough accurate information. Her daily schedule, her interactions with Gordon at school board meetings, that it planted a seed of doubt, not just in Ron's mind, but in the minds of everyone who heard about it. Because in a small town, rumors spread faster than fire. Ron Gillespie received his own letter shortly after. The tone was different, more threatening. Make your wife stop seeing Massey, or I will. The letters weren't signed. No return address. No fingerprints. Just block text on plain paper, mailed from within Circleville itself. Ron confronted Gordon Massey. The 2 men had a heated public argument outside the school administration building. Voices were raised. Accusations flew. But nothing was resolved. No violence. No confession. Just 2 men standing in a parking lot, trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. And then the letters kept coming. Not just to Mary and Ron. Other residents began receiving them. Neighbors, friends. Why? Local business owners. A woman who worked at the bank. A man who coached Little League. Each letter revealed secrets the recipient thought were buried. Some accusations were true. Some were exaggerated. Some were outright lies, carefully constructed to destroy reputations and fracture relationships. The writer's tone was always the same. Cold. Clinical. Almost omniscient. As if the author could see through walls, listen through phone lines, read minds. It was as if the phantom writer was everywhere at once. People started looking over their shoulders, checking their rear-view mirrors, wondering if their neighbor, their coworker, their friend was the one holding the typewriter. Paranoia spread through Circleville like a disease. But the strangest part wasn't the letters themselves. It was the fact that no one, not the police, not private investigators, not the FBI, could figure out who was writing them. For over a year, the letters continued. Circleville became a town under siege by an invisible enemy. And then, in 1977, things escalated. August 19, 1970. Ron Gillespie was driving his pickup truck on a rural road outside Circleville. It was late afternoon, the sun sinking low over the cornfields, casting long shadows across the pavement. He noticed something unusual on the side of the road. A handmade sign, wooden, crudely painted. It referenced the letters. It referenced his wife, Mary Todd. Ron slowed down, pulled over, got out of the truck. He walked toward the sign, squinting to read the words in the fading light. And that's when he saw it. A gun. A pistol. Rigged to a piece of wire, aimed directly at the sign. A booby trap. If Ron had taken one more step, if he had reached out to touch the sign, the gun would have fired. The bullet would have struck him center mass. Ron froze, backed away slowly, got back in his truck and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Investigators arrived on the scene and carefully dismantled the trap. They dusted for prints. They traced the gun's serial number, and it led them to a man named Paul Freshour. Paul was Ron Gillespie's brother-in-law. He was married to Ron's sister, Karen Sue. The two couples had a complicated, strained relationship. There had been arguments, resentments. A divorce was looming. Paul was arrested, charged with attempted murder. He denied everything. Said he was being framed. Said he didn't write the letters, didn't build the trap, didn't have any reason to hurt Ron. But the evidence pointed to him. The gun was registered in his name. Handwriting analysis suggested he might have written some of the letters, though not all of them. In 1983, Paul Freshour was convicted and sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison. The town breathed a sigh of relief. The phantom writer was caught. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Because after Paul Freshour went to prison, the letters continued. From a cell in the Lebanon Correctional Institution, Paul Freshour sat in disbelief as news reached him. The letters were still being sent. Same typewriter. Same style. Same eerie, invasive knowledge of Circleville's secrets. How? If Paul was the phantom writer, how were the letters still arriving in mailboxes while he was locked behind bars, monitored 24/7, with no access to the outside world beyond supervised phone calls and heavily censored mail? Residents of Circleville were confused, terrified, angry. Some believed Paul had an accomplice, someone on the outside continuing his work. Others began to suspect that Paul had been innocent all along, that the real writer was still out there, free, and had successfully framed him. Investigators reopened the case. They looked at Paul's ex-wife, Karen Sue Freshour. She had access to the typewriter used in some of the early letters. She had motive, bitterness over the divorce, resentment toward her brother Ron and his wife Mary. She had knowledge of the family's private affairs. But she was never charged, never arrested, never even formally named as a suspect. The letters eventually slowed, then stopped altogether sometime in the mid-1990s. Paul Freshour was paroled in 1994 after serving over a decade in prison. He maintained his innocence until the day he died in 2012. So, what really happened? Let's strip away the paranormal theories. The idea that the Phantom Writer was a ghost, a demon, or some kind of supernatural force, and look at the forensic reality. The most logical explanation is that multiple people were involved in writing the letters. Perhaps Paul Freshour wrote some of them. Perhaps Karen Sue wrote others. Perhaps a third party, someone with deep knowledge of the town's secrets, someone who enjoyed watching Circleville tear itself apart, joined in later. Small towns breed grudges. They also breed gossip. In a place like Circleville, where everyone knows everyone, it's not hard to gather dirt. You overhear conversations at the grocery store. You see cars parked where they shouldn't be at odd hours. You notice patterns in people's routines. You listen. The omniscience of the Phantom Writer wasn't supernatural. It was surveillance. Human, patient, obsessive. But here's the most unsettling possibility. What if the letters weren't the work of one person? Or even two? What if the phenomenon became contagious? What if, after the first few letters, other people in Circleville, angry neighbors, vindictive ex-spouses, bored teenagers, started writing their own, mimicking the style, adding their own secrets, feeding the paranoia? A town-wide breakdown, not a conspiracy, not a mastermind, just a collective psychological collapse. Because when you live in a place where everyone knows your secrets, where privacy is an illusion and trust is currency, sometimes the scariest thing isn't who's writing the letters. It's the realization that anyone could be. To this day, the identity of the Circleville letter writer remains officially unsolved. Paul Freshour died in 2012, still claiming innocence. The letters stopped years ago, but the scars remain. In Circleville, trust died in the mailbox. Neighbors still eye each other with suspicion. Doors that used to stay unlocked are now bolted shut. The sense of safety that once defined this small Ohio town was shattered by an invisible enemy armed with nothing more than a typewriter and intimate knowledge. And once that trust is gone, it never really comes back. This case remains one of the most baffling psychological terror campaigns in American history. Not because of what the writer did, but because of what the town became. The family possessed by the hills. Red Oak, Oklahoma. Population 541. A tiny, rural town in the southeastern corner of Oklahoma, near the Arkansas border. The kind of place where families have lived for generations, where church attendance is high, where everyone waves when they pass on the road, where strange behavior doesn't go unnoticed. In 2009, the Jameson family, Bobby, Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison, were living in a small rented house on the outskirts of town. On the surface, they seemed like an ordinary family. Bobby was 44, a quiet man who worked odd jobs. Sherilyn was 40, petite and soft-spoken. Madison was a bright, energetic little girl who loved to play outside with their dog, Maisie. But something was wrong. Friends and family members said Bobby and Sherilyn had become increasingly paranoid over the past year. Withdrawn, obsessed with things that didn't make sense. They claimed their house was haunted. They said they were being attacked by witches. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. They believed, genuinely, deeply, that supernatural forces were targeting them. Bobby told his pastor that demons were inside the house, that he could hear them whispering at night, that objects moved on their own. Sherilyn told a friend that a witch had put a curse on them, that their daughter was in danger, that they needed to leave, to get away, to find safety somewhere remote, somewhere the spirits couldn't follow. To outsiders, it sounded like delusion. mental illness, maybe drug use. But to Bobby and Sherilyn, it was real. In early October 2009, the Jamisons decided to act. They drove into the Sans Bois Mountains, a rugged, isolated wilderness area about 30 miles from their home, to look at a plot of land. They wanted to buy property, build a cabin, live off-grid, away from people, away from whatever they believed was tormenting them. They loaded up their white 1969 Chevy pickup truck, brought their dog, packed supplies, and they never came back. 8 days later, on October 17, 2009, hunters stumbled upon the Jamison family's truck. It was parked on a remote mountain road deep in the Sans Bois Mountains, miles from the nearest paved highway. Doors unlocked, windows rolled down, keys still in the ignition. The engine was cold. The truck had been sitting there for days. Inside, investigators found something that made no sense. $32,000 in cash, stacked neatly in a bank bag, sitting on the back seat, untouched. Madison's dog, Maisie, was still in the truck, malnourished and dehydrated, but alive. Their cell phones were there, wallets, IDs, Sherilyn's purse. Everything you would need to survive, or to run away, was still in the truck. But the family was gone. A massive search was launched. Volunteers combed the mountains. Helicopters flew overhead. Search dogs tracked scents through the dense underbrush. Nothing. No footprints. No clothing. No signs of struggle. No blood. It was as if the Jamison family had simply vanished into thin air. And then investigators found the security footage. Before they left for the mountains, Bobby and Sherilyn had installed a security camera outside their rental home. It was aimed at the driveway and the front door. The footage from the morning of October 8, 2009, the day they disappeared, was recovered from the camera's memory card. And it's one of the most unsettling pieces of evidence in modern true crime. The video shows Bobby and Sherilyn packing their truck, but they're not moving normally. They walk back and forth between the house and the truck, slowly, stiffly, almost mechanically. No conversation, no gestures, no eye contact, no acknowledgement of each other's presence. Just silent, repetitive motion, over and over, for more than 20 minutes. Sherilyn picks up a small item from inside the house, walks to the truck, places it in the bed, turns around, walks back inside. Bobby does the same. Slow, deliberate steps, no expression on his face. They move like automatons, like people in a trance, like zombies. You might wonder why a couple packing a truck would move like that. Some people watched that footage and said, possession. They pointed to the jerky, unnatural movements, the blank expressions, the eerie silence. They said Bobby and Sherilyn were under the control of something beyond this world. But the forensic reality is far darker. 4 years passed. The Jamison family remained missing. The case went cold. Then, on November 16, 2013, hunters found skeletal remains in the Sans Bois Mountains. 2 adults, 1 child, lying face down in a remote, heavily wooded area about 3 miles from where the truck had been found. The bodies were side by side, close together, almost arranged. It was the Jamison family. Dental records confirmed it. Bobby, Sherilyn, Madison. But the cause of death, undetermined. No bullet wounds. No blunt force trauma. No broken bones. The bodies had decomposed too much to detect soft tissue injuries or toxicology. No clear evidence of foul play. Just 3 bodies, lying in the middle of nowhere, with no explanation for how they got there or why they died. So what happened? Let's eliminate the supernatural. The possession theory doesn't hold up under forensic scrutiny. There's no such thing as demonic influence in medical science. Demons don't leave physical evidence. Spirits don't cause families to walk into the wilderness and die. But there is such a thing as shared psychotic disorder, also known as folie à deux, French for madness of two. It's a rare psychiatric condition where delusional beliefs are transmitted from one person to another, usually between spouses, siblings, or close family members who are isolated from outside influence. And here's the key detail that investigators found during the search of the Jameson home. Bobby and Sherilyn had been using methamphetamine heavily. Meth is a powerful stimulant that, when used chronically, induces severe paranoia, hallucinations, and delusions of persecution. Users often believe they're being watched, followed, attacked by unseen enemies. The trance-like behavior captured on the security footage? That's consistent with meth-induced catatonia, a state where users become locked in repetitive, purposeless motion. The belief that witches and demons were attacking them? That's consistent with meth psychosis. The decision to drive into the mountains with $32,000 in cash and no clear plan. That's consistent with paranoid flight. The theory that makes the most forensic sense is this. Bobby and Sherilyn, deep in the throes of meth psychosis, became convinced that supernatural forces were hunting them. They fled to the mountains, believing they could escape. They parked the truck. They walked into the woods, perhaps voluntarily, perhaps in a state of confusion and terror. And then they died. Their remains were found close together, positioned as if they had lain down intentionally. Some investigators speculated they may have ingested poison, a murder-suicide, a final act of a shared delusion. Others believe they simply succumbed to exposure, dehydration, the elements. Either way, the impossible nature of their disappearance wasn't supernatural. It was the result of two minds, shattered by drug use and fear, leading their family into the wilderness to die. The Jameson family case is often cited as evidence of the paranormal. Possession witchcraft portals. Ghost hunters have investigated their old rental home. Psychics have claimed to communicate with their spirits. But the truth is far more tragic. Two parents, spiraling into drug-fueled psychosis, convinced they were being hunted by forces only they could see. A little girl, caught in the middle, trusting her parents to keep her safe. And a mountain that swallowed them whole. This story has been buried in local archives for years. Very few people outside Oklahoma have ever heard it told this way. But the forensic evidence points to one thing. Not demons. Just delusion. And that might be the scariest part of all. Because it shows us how quickly the human mind can break. How easily fear can override logic. How two people who loved each other, who loved their daughter, could walk hand in hand into oblivion, convinced they were doing the right thing. The Sans Bois Mountains are still there. Quiet, isolated, waiting. And the Jameson family rests somewhere in those hills, victims not of the supernatural, but of their own unraveling minds. The phantom gas of Mattoon. Mattoon, Illinois, with a population of 19,000. A quiet industrial town in the heartland of America, sitting in the flat prairie lands of central Illinois. Factory whistles mark the hours. Tree-lined streets stretch through residential neighborhoods. White picket fences, corner drugstores, church bells on Sunday mornings. It's September 1944. World War II is raging overseas. American boys are dying in France and the Pacific, in places most people in Mattoon have never heard of. The home front is gripped by a constant, low-level anxiety. Rationing blackouts, fear of invasion, fear of saboteurs, fear of enemies lurking in the shadows. And into this atmosphere of collective tension, something impossible begins to happen. September 1st, 1944, Tarto, 11:30 p.m. A woman named Aline Kearney is lying in bed in her modest home on Grand Avenue, on the east side of Mattoon. Her husband, Bert, is working the night shift at the railroad yard. Her children are asleep down the hall. The house is quiet, except for the distant hum of cicadas outside the open window. Aline is drifting off to sleep when something wakes her. A smell. Sweet. Sickly. Floral, but wrong. Like cheap perfume mixed with something chemical. Something industrial. It's coming through the open bedroom window, carried on the night breeze. At first, she thinks maybe it's someone burning trash in a nearby yard, or maybe exhaust from a passing car. But the smell intensifies, and then her legs go numb. She tries to sit up. Can't. Her arms feel impossibly heavy, like they're made of lead. Her chest tightens. She wants to call out to her children, but her throat won't work properly. Her tongue feels thick. Her jaw won't move. Paralysis. She lies there, terrified, unable to move, unable to scream, as the smell grows stronger and the numbness spreads up through her torso. Minutes pass, though they feel like hours. And then, slowly, the sensation begins to fade. Movement returns to her legs, her arms, her throat. She gasps for air. The smell dissipates, carried away by the breeze. She lies in the dark, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what just happened. When Bert Kearney comes home from his shift at 1:30 a.m., Aline tells him everything. The smell, the paralysis, the terror. Bert is skeptical, thinks maybe she had a bad dream, a panic attack. Maybe she ate something that didn't agree with her. But then he decides to check outside, just to be safe. He grabs a flashlight, steps out the back door, walks around the side of the house toward Aline's bedroom window, and he sees him. A man, tall, bit, dressed in dark clothing, standing near the bedroom window, partially obscured by the shadows of a large elm tree. The man sees Bert and runs. Bert chases him down the alley behind the house, through a neighbor's yard, for 2 full blocks before losing him in the maze of dark streets and unlit backyards. Out of breath, heart racing, Bert returns home. He locks every door and window, sits up the rest of the night with a kitchen knife in his lap. The next morning, he and Aline report the incident to the Mattoon Police Department. Officers take a statement, file it away, thank them for their time. Just another strange story in a town full of wartime anxiety. But then, it happens again. September 5th, 1944. 4 nights later, a woman named Mrs. Bert Ryder, who lives on the north side of Mattoon, wakes in the middle of the night. Same smell. Sweet. Chemical. Nauseating. Same symptoms. Numbness in her legs. Tightness in her chest. Nausea. Difficulty breathing. She manages to drag herself to the phone and call the police. Officers arrive within minutes, search the property, check the windows and doors. Nothing. No intruder. No source of the gas. No explanation. Mrs. Ryder is taken to the hospital as a precaution. Doctors examine her, find no obvious injuries, no toxins in her blood. They send her home with instructions to rest. 2 nights later, it happens again. Different victim. Different part of town. Then another. Then 3 attacks in one night. All across Mattoon. All following the same pattern. a sickly, sweet smell drifting through an open window in the middle of the night. Sudden paralysis of the legs, sometimes spreading to the arms and torso. Nausea, vomiting, burning sensation in the mouth and throat, difficulty breathing, chest pain, disorientation, and sometimes witnesses, family members who woke to find the victim incapacitated. Neighbors who saw a shadowy figure lurking near the victim's home. Tall, dressed in dark clothing, carrying something, a metal canister or a spray device. The local newspaper, the Matun Daily Journal Gazette, began covering the story. September 8, 1944. Anesthetic prowler on loose. September 9th. Mrs. Cord's latest victim of gas attacks. September 10th. Mad anesthetist strikes again. The town erupted in panic. People locked their windows, even in the oppressive late summer heat. Even though homes in 1944 didn't have air conditioning and the indoor temperatures were stifling, they armed themselves. Shotguns, hunting rifles, baseball bats, tire irons. Groups of men formed vigilante patrols, roaming the streets at night in pickup trucks and on foot, searching for the mad gasser. The police department was overwhelmed. Dozens of calls every night. Dozens of reported attacks. Officers racing from house to house, finding victims with genuine symptoms: vomiting, weakness, respiratory distress. But no physical evidence of an intruder. No gas residue. No footprints. No fingerprints. No forced entry. It was as if the attacker was a phantom. A ghost who could move through walls, strike without warning, and vanish without a trace. But then, investigators began asking questions, and the answers didn't add up. At this point, you're likely asking the same question the police were asking. What kind of gas causes temporary paralysis but leaves no trace? Let's look at the forensic reality. In the 1940s, several chemical agents were known to cause incapacitation. Chloroform, a volatile liquid used as an anesthetic in the 19th and early 20th centuries. When inhaled, it causes dizziness, unconsciousness, and respiratory depression. But it has significant limitations. It's highly volatile, evaporates quickly in open air. It requires close-range administration to be effective. You can't spray it through a window from outside and expect to incapacitate someone lying in bed 10 or 15 feet away. The concentration would be far too diluted. And chloroform has a distinct, sweet smell, but not floral. More like a solvent. Ether, similar to chloroform, used as an anesthetic and industrial solvent, causes dizziness, unconsciousness, nausea. But ether is highly flammable. One spark a cigarette, a pilot light, a static discharge, and it ignites. No one reported fires. No one smelled burning. And ether's odor is sharp, chemical, almost alcoholic. Not the floral smell victims described. Tear gas, CS gas, or CN gas, used by police and military for crowd control, causes intense burning of the eyes, nose, and throat, coughing, temporary blindness, respiratory distress. But tear gas doesn't cause paralysis. It causes pain and panic. Victims don't lie helpless in bed. They run, they scream, they claw at their faces. Carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas produced by incomplete combustion, causes headache, dizziness, confusion, unconsciousness, death. But it's odorless. Victims wouldn't smell anything. And carbon monoxide poisoning doesn't cause localized paralysis. It affects the entire body uniformly. None of these agents perfectly match the victim's descriptions. And here's the biggest problem. Not a single sample of the gas was ever collected. Police searched victims' homes immediately after attacks. They opened windows, searched for canisters, swabbed surfaces, collected fabric samples from curtains and bedding. Nothing. No residue on windowsills. No chemical traces in the air. No physical evidence of any kind. So what were people experiencing? Some investigators began to suspect the attacks weren't caused by an external chemical agent. Not in the sense that people were lying, but that they were experiencing psychosomatic symptoms. Symptoms generated by the mind, not by actual poisoning. But how does that explain the witnesses? The shadowy figure seen lurking near homes. The smell that multiple people reported? Here's where the story gets more complicated. Because Mattoon in 1944 was not just any town. It was an industrial hub. Let's talk about what happens to the human body under extreme fear. When you believe you're in danger, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Your body floods with adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes. Your breathing becomes rapid and shallow. A condition called hyperventilation. Hyperventilation causes a drop in carbon dioxide levels in the blood, which leads to tingling or numbness in the extremities, legs, arms, fingers, muscle weakness or feeling of paralysis, dizziness, lightheadedness, chest tightness, difficulty breathing, nausea, stomach pain, etc. In other words, the exact symptoms reported by the victims of the mad gasser. Now imagine this scenario. You're lying in bed. You smell something strange, a sweet chemical odor drifting through your window. You've just read in the newspaper that a phantom anesthetist is prowling the town, gassing women in their sleep. Your heart starts racing. You think, is that him? Is he outside my window? You try to get up, but your legs feel weak, heavy. You start breathing faster. Panic sets in. The numbness spreads. Your chest tightens. You can't catch your breath. You're convinced you're being gassed. But in reality, you're experiencing a panic attack triggered by hyperventilation and the power of suggestion. The symptoms are real. The fear is real. But the gas is just industrial pollution you've been smelling for years, now filtered through the lens of terror. By September 10th, 1944, Mattoon was in full hysteria. People saw the mad gasser everywhere. On rooftops, in alleys, peering through windows, running through backyards. One man fired both barrels of his shotgun at a shadow moving through his vegetable garden. When police arrived, they found he'd obliterated a tomato plant. A woman screamed that the gasser was breaking into her home through the kitchen window. Officers arrived within 2 minutes to find her cat had knocked over a bottle of nail polish remover. The acetone fumes had filled the room. Another resident called police to report seeing the gasser running across a field at the edge of town. A dozen armed men chased the figure for half a mile before realizing it was the mailman, finishing his evening route in the fading light. A local factory worker reported finding a strange, sticky substance on his front porch. He was convinced it was residue from the gasser's sprayer. Police collected a sample. Lab analysis revealed it was tree sap beto. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Suspicion and paranoia spread like wildfire. Anyone acting strange, anyone out late at night, anyone who didn't fit the mold was a suspect. The Mattoon Police Department was overwhelmed. Chief C.E. Cole and his small force of officers were fielding 30 to 40 calls per night, responding to every report, finding nothing. On September 12th, Chief Cole held a press conference. He was blunt, almost harsh. He stated that many, perhaps most, of the reported attacks were likely false alarms, that the symptoms were real, but probably not caused by an external attacker, that industrial fumes from local factories might be responsible, that fear and suggestion were powerful forces. He urged residents to remain calm. to lock their doors and windows as a precaution, but to stop panic, to stop seeing phantoms in every shadow. The Mattoon Daily Journal-Gazette ran his statement on the front page, and within 48 hours, the attacks stopped, almost immediately. By September 15th, reports had dropped to zero. The mad gasser of Mattoon vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. So what really happened? The consensus among psychologists, sociologists, and historians is that Mattoon experienced a classic case of mass psychogenic illness, also called mass hysteria or epidemic hysteria. It's a well-documented phenomenon. It works like this. An ambiguous stimulus occurs. In Mattoon's case, the stimulus was industrial pollution. Specifically, the sweet-smelling fumes from local factories that had been present for years, but were generally ignored. One person interprets the stimulus as dangerous. Aline Kearney smelled the fumes, felt unwell, possibly due to hyperventilation or a panic attack, and concluded she was being attacked. The media amplifies the story. The local newspaper ran sensational headlines, transforming a single incident into a town-wide crisis. Other people, primed by fear, begin experiencing similar symptoms. Once the idea of the mad gasser took hold, people who smelled the industrial fumes, smells they'd been ignoring for years, suddenly interpreted them as threats. Their bodies responded with real symptoms, triggered by anxiety and hyperventilation. The cycle reinforces itself. Each new attack validated the fears of the community, leading to more reports, more panic, more symptoms. Mattoon, in 1944, was the perfect environment for this phenomenon. High baseline anxiety due to World War II, fear of saboteurs, spies, enemy agents, poor air quality from industrial pollution, providing an ambiguous sensory trigger. A sensationalist local newspaper that framed the events as attacks rather than illnesses. A tight-knit community where information and panic spread quickly through social networks. The mad gasser was never caught because he never existed. The witnesses who saw a shadowy figure near victims' homes, likely misidentifications, shadows cast by trees, neighbors checking their own properties, late-night pedestrians, paranoia transforming ordinary sights into sinister threats. The paralysis and nausea reported by victims, real symptoms, but caused by hyperventilation, panic attacks, and the power of expectation, not by an external chemical agent. The mad gasser of Mattoon is one of the most famous and well-studied cases of mass hysteria in American history. It's been analyzed in psychology textbooks, examined by sociologists studying collective behavior, cited as a cautionary tale about the power of fear and the dangers of sensationalist media. But here's what makes it truly terrifying. The people of Mattoon weren't lying. They weren't faking. They weren't seeking attention. They genuinely believed they were being attacked. They felt the symptoms. They smelled the gas. They saw the figure in the dark. And for 2 weeks in September 1944, an entire town lived in a nightmare that didn't exist. A shared delusion so powerful, it felt real. This case remains one of the most baffling examples of how fear can spread like a contagious virus, infecting minds, altering perception, creating a collective reality that has no basis in physical evidence. Not a ghost, not a phantom, just a town, scared and suffocating under the weight of wartime anxiety, turning ordinary industrial smells and shadows into a monster. And maybe that's the scariest part, because it means it could happen again, anywhere. Anytime fear takes hold and a community starts seeing threats that aren't there. The mad gasser of Mattoon was defeated not by an arrest, not by evidence, not by an investigation, but by a police chief who stood up and said, "Stop, This isn't real. And the town listened. The panic ended. The phantom disappeared. But the lesson remains. The House of Whispers. Villisca, Iowa. A small farming community in the southwestern corner of Iowa, about 50 miles from the Nebraska border. Grain elevators rise above the flat landscape. Church steeples mark the center of town. Main Street has a hardware store, a general store, a bank, a drugstore, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where children walk to school alone, where neighbors never lock their doors. June 9th, 1912. A warm Sunday evening. The sun is setting over the cornfields, casting long golden shadows across the dirt roads that crisscross the town. The Moore family attends a special children's program at the Presbyterian Church on West 4th Street. It's a social event. Parents and children from across Villisca fill the pews. There's singing, performances, laughter. Josiah B. Moore, 43, sits with his wife Sarah, 39. Josiah is a well-respected businessman in Villisca, a partner in the local implement dealership, Moore and Peckham. He's a church elder, a Freemason, a pillar of the community. Their 4 children sit beside them. Herman 11, Catherine 10, Boyd 7, and Paul 5. Also attending the program are 2 young girls from a neighboring family. Lena Stillinger, 12, and her younger sister Ina, 18. The Stillinger sisters are friends with the Moore daughters. After the program ends around 9:30 p.m., Sarah Moore invites Lena and Ina to spend the night at their house. The girls are thrilled. Their parents agree. The group, 6 Moores and 2 Stillingers, walks home together through the quiet streets of Villisca under the fading light. Neighbors wave from porches. The air smells like grass and dust in summer. They arrive at the Moore house, a modest white 2-story frame home at 508 East 2nd Street, just after 10:00 p.m. The children are tired from the excitement of the evening. Sarah helps them change into night clothes. The 4 more children go upstairs to their bedrooms. Lena and Ina are given the downstairs guest bedroom, just off the parlor. Josiah does something unusual that night. He locks the doors. Front door out. Back door. It's not something he normally does. Villisca is safe. Crime is virtually non-existent. But for some reason, perhaps because there are guests in the house, perhaps because of an instinct he can't name, Josiah locks the doors. The house goes dark. The children settle into their beds. Sarah and Josiah retire to their upstairs bedroom. Everyone sleeps. And sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. someone moves through that house with an axe. Monday morning, June 10th, 1912. Mary Peckham, a neighbor who lives next door, notices something strange. It's past 7 a.m. The sun is already bright and hot. Most families in Villisca are up and moving. Children are doing morning chores. Smoke rises from kitchen stoves as breakfast is prepared. But the Moore house is silent. All the curtains are drawn. The shades are pulled down tight, blocking out the morning light. No one has come outside. No smoke rises from the chimney. No sounds of life. At first, Mary thinks maybe the Moores are sleeping in. It was a late night, after all. But as the morning wears on, 8 a.m. and 8:30, she grows concerned. Josiah Moore is a punctual man. He's never late to work. He should have left for the store by now. Mary walks across the yard and knocks on the door. No answer. She knocks louder. Calls out, "Josiah? Sarah?" Nothing. She tries the door. It's locked. Now genuinely worried, Mary walks to the home of Josiah's business partner, Ross Moore, no relation. She tells him something is wrong. The house is locked up tight, and no one is answering. Ross grabs a spare key that Josiah had given him for emergencies. He walks to the Moore house, Mary following close behind. Ross unlocks the front door, pushes it open. Josiah? The house is dark, quiet, still. He steps inside. The air is stale, heavy, wrong. Ross walks through the downstairs parlor. He sees the guest bedroom door, slightly ajar. He pushes it open, and he sees them. Lena and Ina Stillinger, lying in bed, covered in blood. Ross stumbles backward. His mind can't process what he's seeing. He doesn't go upstairs. He runs. He sprints out of the house across the yard, shouting for help. Within minutes, Town Marshal Hank Horton arrives. Other men from the neighborhood. A doctor. They enter the house, and they find a scene of unimaginable horror. All 8 people are dead. Josiah and Sarah Moore in their upstairs bedroom, bludgeoned beyond recognition. Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul in their bedrooms, the same. Lena and Ina Stillinger downstairs, faces destroyed. Every victim has been struck multiple times with the blunt end of an axe. Skulls shattered. Blood on the walls, the ceilings, the bedding. The violence is frenzied, excessive, brutal. The murder weapon, Josiah Moore's own axe, taken from a storage shed in the backyard, leans against the wall in the downstairs guest bedroom, blade resting on the floor, handle propped against the wallpaper. It's covered in blood and hair. But it's not just the brutality that's disturbing. It's the staging. Every mirror in the house has been covered. Sheets draped over the dresser mirror in the master bedroom. Towels over the bathroom mirror. Clothing over the small vanity mirror in the girls' room. Every window has been covered with curtains, blankets, or clothing, blocking out any trace of natural light. In the kitchen, investigators find a half-eaten plate of food on the table. Bread, cold bacon, crumbs. Someone had eaten a meal after the murders. Upstairs, in the cramped attic space, they find more evidence. 2 cigarette butts, hand-rolled, still relatively fresh, resting on the dusty floorboards. A depression in the loose insulation where someone had been sitting or lying for an extended period, and a small gap between the floorboards. A crack in the wood that provides a narrow view down into the master bedroom below. The killer had been in the attic, waiting, watching, listening. Let's talk about what the forensic evidence actually tells us. The killer didn't break into the house. All the doors and windows were locked from the inside. There was no forced entry, no broken glass, no damaged locks. This suggests one of 2 things. The killer had a key. The killer was already inside the house when the family returned home from church. Given the evidence found in the attic, the cigarette butts, the impression in the insulation, the view down into the bedroom, the second theory is far more likely. The killer entered the house sometime before the Moore family returned from the church program. Perhaps he broke in earlier in the day, while the house was empty. Perhaps he slipped in through an unlocked door or window while the family was at church. We don't know. But by the time the Moores came home, he was already there, hiding in the attic. Imagine what that was like. You're lying in a cramped, dark space. Insulation fibers clinging to your skin. The smell of dust and old wood. The sound of your own breathing, loud in your ears. You hear the front door open. Voices. Laughter. Children chattering about the evening's program. Footsteps below you. Moving through the house. Up the stairs. You hear Sarah Moore helping the children change into their night clothes. You hear Josiah checking the doors, turning the locks. You hear the creak of bed springs as bodies settle into beds. You hear voices fading into murmurs, then silence. You wait. You smoke a cigarette to calm your nerves, then another. You wait until you're sure they're asleep, and then you move. The killer descended from the attic sometime after midnight. He went to the backyard shed and retrieved Josiah's axe. Then he entered the house and methodically killed everyone inside. He started with Josiah and Sarah. They were the adults, the threats, the ones who could fight back. He struck them in their sleep. Multiple blows to the head with the blunt end of the axe. Josiah likely died instantly. Sarah may have woken for a moment. There's evidence she tried to lift her arm defensively, but she was overpowered. Then he moved to the children's rooms. Herman, Catherine, Boyd, Paul, one by one. Each child struck multiple times. The violence was overkill, frenzied. Some investigators believe this indicates personal rage, that the killer knew the family, that this wasn't random. Finally, he went downstairs to the guest bedroom where Lena and Ina Stillinger were sleeping. He killed them too. Lena was older. Some evidence suggests she may have woken during the attack. There are defensive wounds on her arms. Her body is positioned differently from the others, as if she tried to move, to fight, to escape, but she didn't make it. After the murders, the killer did something strange. He covered all the mirrors. Why? Several theories have been proposed. Superstition. In many cultures, there's a belief that mirrors trap souls. Perhaps the killer was afraid the spirits of his victims would linger, watching him. Guilt. Perhaps he couldn't face his own reflection after what he'd done. The mirrors forced him to confront the reality of his actions. Ritual. Some investigators believe the covering of mirrors indicates a specific psychological or religious compulsion. We don't know. What we do know is that after covering the mirrors, he draped the windows with blankets and curtains, plunging the house into darkness even as dawn approached. Then he went to the kitchen and ate, calmly, methodically. He sat at the table in a house filled with corpses and ate bread and bacon. Then he washed his hands in a basin, smoked another cigarette, and sometime before dawn, he unlocked the front door from the inside, stepped out into the early morning, and walked away into the streets of Villisca Daranor and vanished. The Villisca axe murders were never solved, but several suspects emerged over the years. Reverend George Kelly, a traveling Presbyterian minister who had attended the children's program at the church that night. He left Villisca early the next morning on a train. Kelly had a history of erratic behavior. He suffered from mental illness and had been institutionalized multiple times. In the years following the murders, he made several conflicting confessions. He told authorities he'd killed the Moors. Then he recanted. Then he confessed again. He was tried twice for the murders. Both trials ended in hung juries. He was eventually released and died in a mental institution in 1954. Many investigators believe Kelly was mentally ill and seeking attention, not the actual killer. Frank F. Jones, a prominent Villisca businessman, Iowa state senator, and former employer of Josiah Moore. Jones and Moore had a bitter falling out years earlier. Moore had left Jones's company and started his own competing business. The rivalry was personal and intense. Some investigators believe Jones hired a hitman to kill the Moore family as revenge. The suspected hitman was a man named William Blackie Mansfield, a drifter and career criminal who had worked for Jones in the past. Mansfield was investigated but never charged. He had alibis, though they were shaky, and there was no physical evidence linking him to the scene. Jones was never formally accused, but rumors plagued him for the rest of his life. Henry Lee Moore, no relation to the victims. A serial killer who murdered multiple families with an axe across the Midwest between 1911 and 1912. His crimes followed a disturbingly similar pattern. Entire families killed in their beds as they slept. Faces destroyed with the blunt end of an axe. Mirrors covered. No signs of forced entry. Henry Lee Moore was convicted of other axe murders and spent the rest of his life in prison. He was never charged with the Villisca murders, but some investigators believe he was responsible. The problem? Henry Lee Moore was in prison in Missouri at the time of the Villisca murders. His alibi is solid. Unless he had an accomplice, or unless the prison records are wrong, he couldn't have been in Villisca on June 10, 1912. The truth? We'll probably never know. Moore House still stands at 508 East 2nd Street in Villisca, Iowa. It's been restored to look exactly as it did on the night of June 9, 1912. The same wallpaper, the same furniture, the same layout. You can visit it, walk through the rooms, stand in the attic where the killer waited. You can even spend the night, if you're brave enough. People say it's haunted. They report hearing children's voices, footsteps on the stairs, the sound of an axe striking wood, shadows moving through the rooms, mirrors covered by unseen hands. Paranormal investigators have spent countless hours in the house, recording EVPs, capturing orbs on camera, claiming to communicate with the spirits of the Moore family. But here's the thing. The ghost aspect of this case, the haunting, the supernatural elements, has overshadowed the real horror. This wasn't a supernatural event. This wasn't a demon, a curse, a portal to another dimension. This was a man, flesh and blood, a man who hid in an attic, who listened to a family settle in for the night, who waited, patient and silent, while they brushed their teeth, said their prayers, kissed their children goodnight, who waited until they were defenseless, and then destroyed them. The House of Whispers isn't haunted by spirits. It's haunted by the memory of what a human being is capable of. The methodical planning, the cold patience, the brutal execution. And that's a far more terrifying thought than any ghost. Because ghosts can't hide in your attic. But a man with an axe can. And on a quiet Sunday night in a small Iowa town, he did. The Vanishing at Levitt Lane, Springfield, Missouri, a mid-sized city in the heart of the Ozarks, known for its colleges, its safety, its strong sense of community, the kind of place where high school graduations are major events, where everyone knows the local families, where crime happens, but not this kind of crime. June 6, 1992. Two young women, Susie Streeter, 19, and Stacy McCall, 18, have just graduated from Kickapoo High School. It's a Saturday night, the culmination of years of hard work, friendships, dreams. They're excited. Their whole lives are ahead of them. College careers, freedom. After the graduation ceremony, they attend parties across town. They bounce from house to house, celebrating with friends, taking photos, making promises to stay in touch. The original plan is to spend the night at a friend's house, a girl named Janelle Kirby. Several graduates are staying there. It's going to be a sleepover, one last night of high school nostalgia before everyone scatters. But when Susie and Stacy arrive at Janelle's house around 2 a.m., they find it's too crowded, too loud. People are drinking, there's not enough space to sleep comfortably. They decide to go to Susie's house instead. Susie lives at 1717 East Delmar Street with her mother, Cheryl Levitt, 47, a hairstylist who operates a small salon out of their home. Stacy calls her mother from Janelle's house to let her know about the change of plans. Mrs. McCall later recalls that Stacy sounded happy, normal, excited. She tells her mother she'll be home in the morning. They're planning to go to a water park, Whitewater Bay, with friends. Susie and Stacy leave Janelle's house around 2:15 a.m. and drive to the Levitt home. It's a small, single-story house in a quiet residential neighborhood. Well kept. Safe. They arrive just after 2:30 a.m. Cheryl is already asleep. She has to work in the morning. A hair appointment at 8:00 a.m. Susie and Stacy try to be quiet. They change into night clothes. They leave their makeup and jewelry on the vanity in Susie's room. They set their purses side by side in the living room. Susie's, Cheryl's, lined up neatly like soldiers. They lock the front door. And then they go to bed. Stacy sleeps on the couch in the living room. Susie and Cheryl are in their respective bedrooms, sometime between 2:30 a.m. and 8:00 a.m. All three women vanish. Sunday morning, June 7th, 1992. Tarred, around 8:00 a.m., Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend, Mike Henson, arrive at the Levitt house. They're supposed to pick up Susie and Stacy and head to Whitewater Bay. Other friends are meeting them there. Janelle knocks on the door. No answer. She tries again, knocks louder. Still nothing. Mike tries the door, it's unlocked. They step inside, and immediately something feels wrong. The house is too quiet, too still. Susie's car is in the driveway. Stacy's car is parked on the street. Cheryl's car is in the carport. All three vehicles, right where they should be. Inside, the house looks normal. Clean, organized, but off. In the living room, three purses sit in a row on the floor near the couch. Wallets, inside IDs, cash, credit cards, all there. Stacy's car keys are on the coffee table. On the kitchen counter, there's an unlit cigarette and a pack of matches. Cheryl's brand. In the bedrooms, the beds are rumpled, as if someone had been lying on them, but not unmade. The covers aren't pulled back. It's as if someone was resting on top of the comforter, fully clothed. In Susie's bedroom, makeup is arranged neatly on the vanity. Jewelry on the dresser. Everything in its place. In Cheryl's bedroom, her glasses are on the nightstand. Her cigarettes. Her jewelry. Things she would never leave behind. The TV is on in the living room, volume low, tuned to a static channel. The dog, a small Yorkie named Cinnamon, is running around the house, anxious, whining. But Susie, Stacy, and Cheryl are gone. Janelle and Mike walk through the house calling their names. Nothing. They check the backyard. The garage. Nothing. They notice something strange on the front porch. The glass globe covering the porch light is shattered. Pieces of glass are swept into a neat pile on the concrete step, as if someone had cleaned up quickly, carelessly. Janelle picks up the phone and dials Cheryl's mother, Susie's grandmother, asks if she's heard from them. No. She calls Stacy's mother. Same answer. Now, genuinely worried, Janelle and Mike call the police. But before officers arrive, something critical happens. Janelle notices the answering machine is blinking. There are messages. She hits play. The first message is routine, a friend calling to confirm plans. The second message is disturbing. A man's voice, obscene, graphic, calling for Cheryl by name. Janelle is shocked. She doesn't know what to do. She listens to the rest of the messages, some from friends calling Susie and Stacy, asking where they are. In a moment of panic and confusion, Janelle deletes several of the messages. She later explains that she thought they were unimportant clutter, that she was trying to help, that she didn't realize she was erasing potential evidence. Critical mistake. Whatever was on that answering machine, possibly a voice, possibly a clue, possibly a threat, was gone forever. Springfield police arrive around 9 a.m. They search the house. Find no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks, No signs of struggle, no blood, no weapons. Everything looks normal, except 3 women are missing, and no one saw or heard anything. In the hours and days following the disappearance, investigators canvassed the neighborhood. One neighbor reported hearing a loud conversation or possibly an argument around 3:00 a.m. near the Levitt house, but the neighbor couldn't say for sure where it was coming from, and they didn't see anything. Another neighbor reported seeing a suspicious van, a white or light-colored panel van, parked on the street early that morning, but they didn't get a license plate, and the van was gone by the time police arrived. No one saw the women leave. No one heard screams. No one saw anyone enter or exit the house. Investigators processed the scene, dusted for prints, collected DNA samples, interviewed dozens of people, and found nothing. No forensic evidence pointing to a suspect. No witnesses with concrete information. So what happened? Let's walk through the theories. Theory 1. The stalker. Cheryl Levitt had recently broken up with a boyfriend. Friends said he'd been calling her frequently, showing up at the house unannounced. Some described him as obsessive, controlling, unable to accept the end of the relationship. Police interviewed him extensively. He claimed he was home alone that night. No witnesses to confirm his alibi, but no physical evidence linking him to the scene. He passed a polygraph test, though polygraphs are notoriously unreliable. The obscene phone message on the answering machine suggests someone was fixated on Cheryl. Someone who knew where she lived. Someone who called in the middle of the night. The theory: a stalker. The ex-boyfriend or someone else came to the house that night. He may have knocked on the door. Cheryl, half asleep, thinking it was someone she knew, opened it. He forced his way in. Confronted Cheryl. But Susie and Stacy were there. Witnesses. He couldn't let them go. They'd seen his face. So he took all 3. But how? How do you abduct 3 adult women from a house without causing a disturbance? Without neighbors hearing screams? Without a struggle? The most likely answer: a weapon. A gun held to Cheryl's head, or Susie's, or Stacy's. A threat: come quietly, or I kill her. 3 women, terrified, obeying commands to stay silent, to get into a vehicle, to not resist. It's possible. Disturbingly possible. Theory 2. The grave robber. In 1997, 5 years after the disappearance, a man named Robert Craig Cox was convicted of multiple armed robberies in the Springfield area. Cox was a deeply disturbed individual. He had a history of violence, burglary, and a bizarre obsession with death. He was known to rob graves. He would go to cemeteries, dig up recent burials, and steal jewelry, clothing, anything of value from the corpses. During his interrogation for the robberies, Cox made cryptic, chilling statements about 3 missing women and claimed he knew where they were buried. Police brought him in for questioning about the Springfield 3 case. Cox taunted them, gave vague hints, led investigators on wild goose chases through rural areas outside Springfield. Nothing was ever found. Some investigators believe Cox was responsible for the disappearance. Others believe he was a narcissist who enjoyed taunting police, inserting himself into a famous case for attention. Cox has never been charged. He remains in prison for his other crimes. And the question remains, was he telling the truth? Or was he just playing games? Theory 3. The hospital garage. This is perhaps the most haunting theory. Shortly after the women disappeared, a woman, whose identity has never been publicly revealed, called the Springfield Police Department with a tip. She claimed she'd had a vision or overheard a rumor that the 3 women were buried under the concrete foundation of the Cox South Hospital parking garage. The timing was eerie. The parking garage had been under construction in early June 1992. Fresh concrete had been poured just days after the women vanished. Police took the tip seriously. They brought in ground-penetrating radar equipment, scanned the garage foundation. The results were inconclusive. Some technicians reported detecting anomalies in the concrete voids or irregularities consistent with buried remains. Others said the anomalies were likely just rebar, air pockets, or natural variations in the concrete. To confirm, they would need to excavate, tear up the garage, dig through several feet of concrete. The hospital refused. Too disruptive, too expensive, too much liability if the dig came up empty. And so, to this day, that parking garage stands. Cars drive over it every day. People park there, walk across it, never knowing what might be beneath their feet. Are Susie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Cheryl Levitt buried under that concrete? We may never know. The Springfield Three have been missing for over 30 years. No bodies, no arrests, no resolution. Their case is considered one of the most baffling disappearances in American history, not because of supernatural elements, but because of the sheer impossibility of the logistics. 3 women, abducted from a locked house, in the middle of the night, without a scream, without a fight, without a single witness. How does that happen? The most likely explanation is a predator who acted quickly, decisively, and with terrifying efficiency. Someone who knew the house, knew the layout, knew when to strike. Someone who controlled the situation so completely, perhaps with a weapon, perhaps with threats, perhaps with sheer physical intimidation, that 3 adult women had no chance to fight back, to flee, to call for help. The impossible nature of their disappearance isn't supernatural. It's the result of a cold, calculated, ruthlessly competent criminal. And that might be the scariest part of all. Because somewhere, possibly still in Springfield, possibly living a normal life, someone knows exactly what happened that night. They know where the bodies are. They know how it was done. They've kept that secret for 3 decades. And every day, they wake up and go about their lives carrying the weight of that knowledge. The Springfield 3 case remains unsolved, but it's not forgotten. Susie's mother passed away in 2006, never knowing what happened to her daughter. Stacy's mother is still alive, still searching, still hoping for answers. And somewhere in Springfield, maybe under a parking garage, maybe in a rural field, maybe in a place no one has thought to look, 3 women wait to be found. This story has been buried in local archives for years. Very few people outside Missouri know the details. But the case remains open, and until it's solved, the question lingers. How do you make 3 people vanish without a trace? The men who saw the impossible. Yuba County, California. February 24th, 1978. A Friday night. 5 men pile into a turquoise and white Mercury Montego, a boat of a car, heavy and reliable, the kind that could handle long drives and bad weather. Their names: Gary Mathias, 25, Jack Madruga, 30th, Bill Sterling, 29, Jack Hewitt, 24th, Ted Wire, 32. They're driving from Yuba City, a small agricultural town in Northern California's Central Valley, where the landscape is flat, dominated by orchards and rice fields, to Chico, about 50 miles north, to watch a basketball game. But these aren't ordinary young men heading out for a night of entertainment. All 5 have intellectual disabilities, mild to moderate developmental delays that affect their cognitive function, their decision-making, their ability to navigate complex situations without guidance. They function independently in structured environments. They hold jobs, simple, supervised positions. They live with their families. They follow routines. But they need structure, clear instructions, predictability. They're part of a program called the Gateway Projects, a social organization designed to help adults with developmental disabilities build independence, social skills, and community connections. And they love basketball. Not just watching it, they play it. They're part of a gateway team. They practice twice a week. They compete in local tournaments. Basketball gives them purpose, routine, camaraderie. Tonight, they're driving to Chico to watch their gateway team play in a tournament. They've been talking about it for weeks. They're excited. This isn't just a game. It's their game, their community, their people. Gary Mathias is driving. He's the most cognitively capable of the group. He can read maps, handle money, make decisions. He's also a U.S. Army veteran, served in Germany, honorably discharged. But Gary has a condition, paranoid schizophrenia. When he takes his medication, an antipsychotic prescribed by his psychiatrist, he's stable, functional, rational. He can hold conversations, make plans, distinguish reality from delusion. When he doesn't take his medication, things fall apart. He experiences paranoia, auditory hallucinations, delusions of persecution. He believes people are following him, watching him, plotting against him. But tonight, according to his mother, Gary is doing well. He's been consistent with his medication. He's calm, happy, looking forward to the game. The 5 men arrive at the Chico Memorial Auditorium. Around 6:00 p.m., they buy tickets, find seats in the bleachers, watch their team play. They cheer. They eat snacks, popcorn, candy, soda. They talk to other Gateway families. They're having a great time. The game ends around 10 p.m. Their team wins. The plan is simple. Drive back to Yuba City on Highway 70. Get home by 11 p.m. Get some sleep. There's another game tomorrow, a championship game, and they're all planning to attend. They say goodbye to friends. Walk out to the parking lot. Get into the Montego. Gary starts the engine, pulls out onto the road, and they drive into the night. They should have been home by 11 p.m. They were never seen alive again. February 25th, 1978. Saturday morning. When the 5 men don't show up for breakfast, when they don't come home at all, their families immediately know something is wrong. These men are creatures of habit. They don't deviate from plans. They don't stay out all night. They don't wander off without telling someone. Jack Madruga's mother calls Gary Mathias's mother. Have you seen them? Did they come home? No. She calls Bill Sterling's family. Same answer. No, gunshell. Panic spreads quickly through the network of families. By noon, missing persons reports have been filed with the Yuba City Police Department. Investigators begin retracing the men's movements. They contact the Chico Memorial Auditorium and confirm the men attended the game. Witnesses remember seeing them, all 5, together, laughing, eating snacks, watching the game. Everyone says they seemed fine, normal, happy. The game ended at 10 p.m. Security footage shows them leaving the building, walking toward the parking lot. After that, nothing. No one saw them on Highway 70. No one saw them at gas stations or rest stops between Chico and Yuba City. They vanished. Days pass, then weeks. Search parties form. Volunteers comb the route between Chico and Yuba City. They check ditches, side roads, rural properties. Police interview witnesses, review traffic reports, follow up on every tip. Nothing. Families plaster missing persons flyers across Northern California. Photos of the 5 men. Descriptions. Contact numbers. Local newspapers run stories. 5 men missing after basketball game. Television stations broadcast appeals, but no credible leads emerge. It's as if the Mercury Montego drove off the edge of the earth. Winter turns to spring. The snow in the mountains begins to melt. And then, 4 months later, someone finds the car. June 4th, 1978. A warm Sunday afternoon. A group of motorcyclists, weekend riders from the Sacramento area, are exploring the Plumas National Forest, a vast wilderness area in the Sierra Nevada mountains. They're riding on Oroville-Quincy Road, a rough, unpaved Forest Service route that winds through dense pine forest and steep mountain terrain. The road is rarely used except by logging trucks and hunters. In winter, it's completely impassable, buried under several feet of snow. But now, in early June, the snow has melted enough to make the road accessible. One of the riders notices something strange. A car parked on a narrow turnout about 70 miles northeast of Yuba City. Way off course. Way up the mountain. In the middle of nowhere. They stop to investigate. It's a turquoise and white Mercury Montego. The license plate matches the missing men. The motorcyclists flag down a ranger. Within hours, Plumas County Sheriff's deputies and investigators from Yuba County arrive at the scene. The car is in remarkably good condition. No visible damage. No broken windows. No flat tires. The doors are unlocked. The windows are rolled up. Inside, investigators find the keys still in the ignition, a nearly full tank of gas, enough to drive another 200 miles. Maps. One is open on the front seat, creased and handled. Snacks. Candy wrappers. Soda cans. The men's personal belongings. Wallets, IDs, a few dollars in cash. Glasses. Medications. Nothing appears to be stolen. Nothing is damaged. Investigators try the ignition. The engine turns over immediately. Runs smoothly. The car is fully functional. So why did they abandon it? Deputies examine the road. It's steep, rocky, rutted, not designed for a standard sedan. But the Montego had made it this far without getting stuck. There are no signs the car was disabled. No mechanical failure. No reason it couldn't have been driven back down the mountain. Investigators follow faint footprints leading away from the car. The tracks are eroded. Months of snow and rain have washed most of them away. But they lead uphill. Deeper into the forest. Higher into the mountains. Away from civilization. Away from the road home. A massive search operation begins. Helicopters equipped with infrared cameras sweep the forest canopy. Search and rescue teams with dogs comb the terrain. Dozens of volunteers from local communities join the effort. They're looking for 5 men, alive or dead, in hundreds of square miles of wilderness. On June 8, 4 days after the car was found, searchers locate a Forest Service trailer about 19.4 miles from the abandoned Montego. It's a small, weathered structure used by road maintenance crews during the summer months. In winter, it's locked up and abandoned. The door has been forced open. Inside, they find Ted Wire. Dead. Ted Wire's body is lying on a small cot against the back wall of the trailer, wrapped in 8 wool blankets. He's been dead for months. The body is severely decomposed, partially mummified by the cold, dry air of the high-altitude winter. The coroner estimates Ted died sometime in mid to late March, roughly 4 to 6 weeks after the men went missing. Cause of death: hypothermia and starvation. But here's what makes the scene so disturbing, so incomprehensible. The trailer was stocked with supplies. Canned food. Dozens of cans. Beans. Stew. Vegetables. Enough to feed a person for months. Propane heater. Functional. Full tank. Matches sitting right next to it on the counter. Blankets. A stack of clean wool blankets in the corner. Water. A working faucet connected to a storage tank. Everything Ted needed to survive was right there, within arm's reach, but he barely used any of it. Investigators find evidence that Ted had eaten some of the food, maybe 5 or 6 cans over the course of several weeks. A few empty cans are stacked near the bed, lids peeled back, contents scraped out. But that's it. He didn't eat more. Didn't open the remaining cans. The propane heater, which could have kept the small trailer warm even in sub-zero temperatures, was never turned on. The pilot was never lit. The matches sat unused. Ted froze to death in a room with heat. He starved to death in a room full of food. Why? The autopsy reveals more disturbing details. Ted had lost over 80 to 100 pounds since he went missing. His body was skeletal, emaciated. The muscle and fat burned away until there was almost nothing left. His feet were in catastrophic condition. Severe frostbite. Gangrenous tissue. Blackened, rotting flesh. He'd wrapped them in torn bedsheets and towels, but the damage was irreversible. Medical examiners estimate Ted would have been in excruciating, debilitating pain. Unable to walk. Barely able to stand. And yet, based on the evidence in the trailer, the opened cans, the arrangement of the blankets, the condition of the body, Ted had survived for 8 to 13 weeks after entering the building. 2 to 3 months, lying on that cot, alone, in agony, slowly starving, slowly freezing. Why didn't he use the heater? Why didn't he eat more? Psychologists and investigators who studied the case later developed a theory. Ted Wire had a significant intellectual disability. His cognitive function was limited. He relied heavily on external guidance and established routines. In his daily life, he was told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Wake up, eat breakfast, go to work, come home. Eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed. Routine, structure, instruction. But in the trailer, there was no one to give him instructions. He may have seen the cans of food and thought, "Am I allowed to eat this? Does this belong to me? Will I get in trouble?" He may have seen the propane heater and thought, "Am I allowed to turn this on? Do I know how? What if I do it wrong?" Without someone to tell him it was okay, without explicit permission, Ted may have been psychologically paralyzed, unable to act, unable to make decisions. So he did nothing. He ate a few cans, maybe when the hunger became unbearable, overriding his hesitation. But he didn't use the heater, didn't ration the food, didn't try to signal for help. He just lay there, waiting for someone to come, waiting for instructions. Wait, and no one came. The search intensifies. Over the next several days, investigators find more remains. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling. Their bodies are discovered together in a heavily forested area, approximately 11.4 miles from the trailer, farther down the mountain. Both had died of hypothermia and exposure months earlier, likely within days or weeks of abandoning the car. Their bodies are partially skeletonized, scattered by animals. Clothing is torn. Personal effects are missing. There are no signs of foul play. No evidence of violence. Just two men who walked into the wilderness in winter without proper gear and succumbed to the cold. Jack Huet. His body is found on June 24th, nearly 3 weeks after the initial discovery of the car. He's located even farther from the trail, deeper into the forest, in a remote ravine, also dead from exposure. His remains are in worse condition, more extensively scattered by scavengers. But the forensic conclusion is the same. Hypothermia. That's 4 bodies. One man is still missing. Gary Mathias, the driver, the Army veteran. The man with schizophrenia is never found. Extensive searches of the area turn up nothing. No clothing. No remains. No trace. To this day, Gary Mathias's fate is unknown. During the investigation, a critical witness comes forward. A man named Joseph Shawns, a 55-year-old resident of Sacramento. Shawns tells investigators that on the night of February 24, the same night the 5 men disappeared, he was driving on Oroville-Quincy Road, heading home from a trip to the mountains. His car broke down. The engine overheated. He pulled over onto a turnout to let it cool down. It was late past midnight. The forest was dark. No streetlights. No other cars. Just Shawns, sitting alone in the cold, waiting. And then he saw headlights. A car pulled up behind him. Stopped. Engine running. Headlights on. Shawns assumed someone was stopping to help. He waited. But the car just sat there. After a few minutes, Shawns got out of his vehicle and walked toward the car. He called out, "You need help?" No response. He moved closer. Saw figures, several people moving around near the car. Talking. Pow. Gesturing. But not clearly visible in the darkness. Shawns called out again. "Is everything okay?" Still no response. And then he saw something that terrified him. A woman holding a baby. She was standing near the car, illuminated faintly by the headlights. Not moving. Just standing there, cradling an infant. Shawns called out to her, "Do you need help? Are you okay?" The woman didn't respond, didn't acknowledge him. And then, abruptly, the headlights went out. The car started moving. It drove past Shawns, slowly, and disappeared up the mountain road into the darkness. Shawns, now thoroughly unnerved, got back into his car and locked the doors. He spent the rest of the night there, too frightened to get out again, occasionally drifting into fitful sleep. In the morning, a Forest Service ranger found him and helped him get his car running. Shawns didn't report the incident at the time. He didn't think much of it, just a strange encounter on a dark road. But when he heard about the 5 missing men weeks later and learned that their car had been found on the same road, in the same area, he came forward. He's certain the car he saw was the Mercury Montego. But here's the problem. There was no woman, no baby. None of the 5 men were traveling with anyone else. No one reported a missing woman or infant. No evidence of additional passengers was found in the car. So what did Joseph Shawns see? Several theories have been proposed. Theory 1, misidentification. Shawns saw the men in the dark, in stressful circumstances. Perhaps one of them was holding something. A jacket, a bag, a rolled-up blanket. And in the poor lighting, it looked like a woman holding a baby. Theory 2, hallucination. Shawns had suffered a mild heart attack while stranded on the mountain. He was cold, frightened, possibly hypoxic. His brain may have constructed the image as a stress response. Theory 3, shared delusion. This is the most disturbing theory. What if Gary Mathias, in the grip of a schizophrenic episode, was hallucinating? What if he saw a woman with a baby, a delusion, a hallucination, and reacted to it? What if his paranoia infected the other men? Gary might have said, "There's someone out there. They're following us. We need to get away." The other 4 men, trusting Gary, relying on him, would have believed him. And Shawns, witnessing the scene from a distance, might have picked up on Gary's behavior, the way Gary was looking at something, gesturing towards something, and his own mind filled in the details. A woman, a baby, neither of which existed. Let's piece together what most likely happened. After the basketball game, the 5 men got into the Montego and started driving home. Somewhere along Highway 70, possibly near the town of Oroville, they made a wrong turn. Or more disturbingly, Gary deliberately turned off the main road. Maybe he was experiencing the early stages of a psychotic break. Maybe he thought they were being followed. Maybe he saw something, real or imagined, that triggered his paranoia. The others didn't question him. Gary was the driver, the leader, the one with military experience. If Gary said they needed to go this way, they went. They drove up into the mountains. The roads got narrower, steeper, rougher. At some point, possibly after encountering Joseph Sean's, Gary stopped the car. Maybe he thought they'd driven far enough to escape whatever he believed was chasing them. Maybe the car got stuck, though investigators found no evidence of this. Maybe Gary, in his confusion, simply decided they should stop. And then, critically, Gary either walked away or convinced the others to abandon the car and continue on foot. This is where logic breaks down. Because the decision to leave a functional vehicle with a full tank of gas and walk into a frozen wilderness makes no sense, unless you're operating on the logic of paranoia. If Gary believed they were being hunted, if he thought staying with the car made them visible, vulnerable, easy to track, then abandoning it might have seemed like the smart move. And the other four, trusting him, followed. They walked miles, through snow, through darkness, through temperatures well below freezing. None of them were dressed for it. They were wearing the clothes they'd worn to a basketball game. Light jackets, jeans, sneakers. No winter coats, no boots, no gloves. Within hours, hypothermia would have begun to set in. Hypothermia doesn't just kill your body, it destroys your mind. As your core temperature drops, your brain stops functioning properly. You become confused, disoriented. You lose the ability to make rational decisions. There's a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, a behavior seen in late-stage hypothermia victims where they feel irrationally hot and remove their clothing. They're found frozen to death, naked, in sub-zero temperatures. There's another phenomenon called terminal burrowing, where victims, in the final moments before death, crawl into small enclosed spaces, under beds, into closets, into hollows in the ground. It's a primal, instinctive behavior, the dying brain's last attempt to find shelter. Now imagine 5 men, all with cognitive disabilities, all relying on structure and guidance, suddenly thrust into a survival situation in the frozen Sierra Nevada. No clear leader, no plan, no instructions. Gary, if he was psychotic, may have been giving commands that made no sense, or he may have wandered off, leaving the others confused and leaderless. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling likely died first. They were found relatively close together, suggesting they stayed near each other, trying to keep warm, until the cold took them. Jack Hewitt may have tried to find help. He was found farther away, deeper in the forest, as if he'd been walking in a specific direction to where he thought he was going. We'll never know. Ted made it the farthest. Somehow, possibly by sheer luck, he found the trailer, got inside, found shelter. But once there, his mind couldn't process what to do next. He ate a few cans of food when hunger became unbearable, but he didn't know if he was allowed to eat more. He didn't know how to use the heater. He didn't know if someone was coming for him. So he lay down, wrapped himself in blankets, and waited for weeks until his body gave out. The Yuba County 5 case is often called America's Dyatlov Pass, a reference to the infamous 1959 incident in Russia, where 9 experienced hikers died under mysterious circumstances in the Ural Mountains. People point to the strange details: the abandoned car with a full tank of gas, the trailer full of food and a working heater, the witness who saw a woman and baby who didn't exist. They say This is impossible. This is supernatural. This defies logic. But it doesn't. This is what happens when the human mind breaks down under extreme stress, terror, and cold. Gary Mathias, almost certainly in the grip of a schizophrenic episode, made a decision that seemed perfectly logical to him in that moment. Get off the main road, drive into the mountains, escape the threat. The others, trusting him, relying on his judgment, followed. Once in the mountains, the cold took over. Hypothermia dismantled their ability to think, to reason, to survive. And 5 men died. Not because of ghosts, not because of aliens, not because of anything supernatural, but because fear, mental illness, and freezing temperatures created a perfect storm of catastrophic decisions. Gary Mathias's body was never found. Some believe he's still out there, somewhere in the vast wilderness of Plumas National Forest. His remains scattered, hidden, lost to time. Others believe Gary survived, that the guilt and horror of what happened drove him to walk away, start over somewhere far from Northern California, to live the rest of his life under a different name. We'll probably never know. But this case remains one of the most haunting, most tragic examples of how quickly the line between safety and oblivion can blur, not because of the supernatural, but because of the terrifying fragility of the human mind when faced with cold, darkness, and the realization that no one is coming to save you. The children stolen by smoke. Fayetteville, West Virginia. December 24, 1945. Christmas Eve. The war in Europe ended 7 months ago. The war in the Pacific ended in August. American soldiers are coming home. The nation is rebuilding. Families are reuniting. There's hope in the air. Hope that the darkness of the past decade is finally lifting. The Sauter family is gathered in their home, a 2-story wooden frame house on a hillside just outside Fayetteville, a small coal mining town nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. George Sauter, 51, sits in his chair by the fireplace. He's an Italian immigrant, came to America in 1908, at the age of 13 with nothing but a willingness to work. He learned English, became a citizen, built a life. He runs a small trucking company hauling coal and freight through the mountain roads. He's proud, hard-working, a man who believes in the American dream because he lived it. Jenny Sauter, his wife, is in the kitchen preparing for tomorrow's Christmas dinner. Together, George and Jenny have 10 children. Tonight, 9 of them are home. The oldest, George Jr., is still in the Army, stationed overseas, but the rest are here. Marion, 17, the oldest daughter, still at home. Martha, 12. Louis, 9. Jenny, 8, named after her mother. Betty, 5. Maurice, 14. John, 23, one of the older sons. George Frankie, 16. Sylvia, 2, the baby of the family. It's a full house. Noisy, chaotic, joyful, a kind of Christmas Eve you see in paintings and movies. The children stay up late, playing with their Christmas toys, sneaking bites of candy, arguing over who gets to hang the last ornament on the tree. Jenny tells them it's time for bed. Santa won't come if you're awake, she says, smiling. But the younger children beg to stay up a little longer. Just a few more minutes. Jenny relents. It's Christmas Eve. Let them have their fun. Around 1:00 a.m., long past any reasonable bedtime, Jenny finally insists. Upstairs now, all of you. Marion and Martha are already asleep in their upstairs bedroom. The 5 younger children, Louis, Jenny, Betty, Frankie, and Maurice, trudge up the stairs, tired but happy, and head to their rooms. George and Jenny stay downstairs with the 2 oldest, John and Sylvia, who are still awake in the living room. Jenny lies down on the couch, too exhausted to climb the stairs herself. She'll sleep here tonight, she decides. Just for a few hours. She drifts off. At approximately 1:30 a.m., Jenny is woken by the telephone ringing. She sits up, disoriented, stumbles to the phone in the hallway, picks up the receiver. Hello? A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Asking for someone who doesn't live at this address. Wrong number. Jenny starts to say so, but before she can speak, she hears sounds in the background of the call. Loud sounds. Laughter. Clinking glasses. Music like a party. The woman on the line laughs. Not at Jenny, but at something happening on her end. And then the line goes dead. Jenny hangs up, puzzled. Who calls at 1:30 in the morning asking for a stranger? And why did it sound like the woman was at a celebration? She shakes it off, goes back to the couch, closes her eyes. At 2:00 a.m., she's woken again, this time by a loud thump on the roof, like something heavy being dropped or thrown. Jenny sits up, listens. Silence. She gets up, walks to the window, looks outside. Nothing. Just the dark hillside, the quiet street, the cold December night. She goes back to the couch, lies down, closes her eyes, and at 2:30 a.m., she wakes to the smell of smoke. Jenny bolts upright. Smoke. Thick. Acrid. Filling the downstairs. She screams for George. Fire! George! Fire! George wakes instantly. Sees the smoke. Sees the orange glow coming from his small office at the back of the house, a room where he keeps his business papers, his files, his records. The fire is already substantial. Spreading fast. George shouts for the children. Get out! Everybody out! John and Sylvia, who were asleep in the living room, wake and run for the front door. Marion and Martha, upstairs in their bedroom at the front of the house, hear the shouting. They smell the smoke. They run to their window, push it open, and jump, landing hard on the ground below. They're bruised, shaken, but alive. George and Jenny run to the staircase, intending to go up and get the 5 younger children, still sleeping on the second floor. But the flames have already engulfed the base of the stairs. The heat is unbearable. The smoke is blinding. George yells up the stairs at the top of his lungs. Louis, Jenny, Betty, Frankie, Maurice, get out, get to the windows. No response. No sound of movement. No footsteps. No crying. No voices. Just the roar of the fire. George runs outside. He's going to get a ladder. Keeps one propped against the side of the house for roof repairs. He'll climb up to the second floor windows and pull the children out. But when he gets to the side of the house, the ladder is gone. It's always there. He used it just 2 days ago to fix a loose shingle. But tonight, it's gone. Frantic, George runs to his 2 coal trucks parked in the driveway. He'll drive one up to the house, climb onto the roof of the truck, and reach the windows that way. He jumps into the first truck, turns the key. Nothing. The engine doesn't even turn over. Dead. He tries the second truck. Same thing. Completely dead. Both trucks, which were running perfectly fine earlier that day, won't start. George sprints to a neighbor's house about 200 yards down the road. Pounds on the door. Screams for help. My house is on fire. Call the fire department. The neighbor, A man named Adolf Holfield wakes, stumbles to the phone, picks up the receiver. The line is dead. No dial tone. No connection. George runs to another neighbor's house. Same plea. This neighbor tries their phone. Also dead. Meanwhile, back at the solder house, Jenny is screaming at the base of the stairs, begging the children to wake up, to get out, to jump from the windows. But there's no response. The fire intensifies. The heat drives her back. She can't get closer. George returns, defeated. No ladder. No trucks. No phone. He and Jenny stand in their yard, helpless, watching their home burn. Neighbors gather. Some try to help, throwing buckets of water on the flames. Useless against a fire of this size. Someone finally drives into town to alert the fire department in person. But the Fayetteville Volunteer Fire Department doesn't arrive until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire started. By the time the firefighters arrive, the house has completely collapsed. All that remains is a smoldering pile of charred wood, ash, and debris, sitting in a blackened cellar hole. George and Jenny Sauter stand in the snow, surrounded by their surviving children. Marian, Martha, John, Sylvia, staring at the ruins. 5 of their children are gone. Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, Todd. Betty, 5. Frankie, 16. Maurice, 14. They never came out. In the days following the fire, investigators and firefighters sift through the debris in the cellar. They're looking for remains, bones, teeth. Anything that would confirm the children died in the fire. They find nothing. No bones. No teeth. No skull fragments. No recognizable human remains of any kind. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, tells the Sauters that the fire must have been exceptionally hot. Hot enough to completely cremate the children's bodies. Turn bone to ash. George doesn't believe it, and he's right not to. George Sauter isn't a scientist, but he's worked with fire his entire adult life. He hauls coal. He knows combustion. He knows heat. He knows what fire can and cannot do. And he knows that a typical house fire does not burn hot enough to completely destroy human bones. Human bones are dense, calcium-rich, incredibly resistant to fire. Crematoriums, purpose-built furnaces designed specifically to reduce human bodies to ash, operate at temperatures between 14 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours to achieve complete cremation. Even then, fragments remain. Large pieces of bone, especially the skull, the pelvis, the femur, that have to be mechanically pulverized into the fine ash we associate with cremated remains. A house fire burns at approximately 800 to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, significantly lower than cremation temperatures, and the Sauter house fire burned for only about 30 to 45 minutes before the structure collapsed. Even in the most catastrophic, intensely hot house fires, skeletal remains are always found. Charred, fragmented, but present. Forensic fire investigators know this. It's a basic principle of fire science. But in the Sauter cellar, there was nothing. Desperate for answers, George hires a private investigator and brings in an independent expert to conduct a more thorough search of the site. They sift through the ashes carefully, methodically, using screens and tools. They find small bone fragments. George's heart stops. Is this his children? The fragments are sent to a lab for analysis. The results come back. The bones are from an animal, likely a pig or cow, not human. George also finds unusual objects in the debris. Household items that should have been destroyed. Light bulbs, unbroken. Glass jars, intact. Electrical wiring. Melted in some places, but not in others, inconsistent with the supposed intensity of the fire. If the fire was hot enough to completely incinerate 5 human bodies, how did glass light bulbs survive? The evidence doesn't add up. In the weeks and months following the fire, disturbing information begins to surface. Witness 1. The fireballs. A woman who lives about half a mile from the solder house reports that she was awake around 2:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve. She looked out her window toward the solder property, saw what she described as balls of fire on the roof of the house. Not embers, not sparks. Fireballs, as if something had been thrown or launched onto the roof. She didn't report it at the time because she assumed it was some kind of Christmas decoration or fireworks. Witness 2. The children in the car. A truck driver passing through Fayetteville on the morning of December 25th, Christmas morning, reports seeing the 5 solder children in a car. He's certain it was them. He'd seen their photos in the newspaper. They were with several adults he didn't recognize. The car had out-of-state plates. The children looked scared. They didn't wave. They didn't speak. Witness 3. The diner. A woman working at a diner approximately 50 miles from Fayetteville claims she saw 4 of the solder children about a week after the fire. They were with 2 men and 2 women. The children looked unkempt, frightened, and refused to make eye contact. When the woman tried to approach them, one of the adults hurried the children out of the diner. Witness 4. A confession. Years later, a man approaches the solders and admits that he was paid $50 the night before the fire to steal their ladder and cut their phone lines. He refuses to say who paid him. He dies before investigators can question him further. And then there are the threats. In the months leading up to the fire, George Soder had been outspoken about his opposition to Benito Mussolini and Italian fascism. George was an Italian immigrant, but he despised Mussolini's regime. He spoke publicly against it. He argued with other Italian immigrants in the area who supported the fascist government. One day, a man came to George's house. An insurance salesman? Or so he claimed. The man made small talk. Then, as he was leaving, he paused on the porch and said something strange. "Your house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." George dismissed it as an odd comment, a bad joke. But after the fire, he remembered, and he became convinced the fire was not an accident. It was arson, retaliation, a message. So what happened to the solder children? Let's examine the possibilities. Theory 1. They died in the fire. The official conclusion of local authorities. The fire was accidental. The children were asleep upstairs. They were overcome by smoke before they could wake and escape. Their bodies were completely incinerated by the intense heat. But this theory has serious problems. No remains found. Impossible in a normal house fire. The children didn't wake. 5 children, including teenagers, all failed to wake despite the noise, the smoke, the shouting. Possible smoke inhalation can cause unconsciousness quickly, but unusual. The physical evidence doesn't support the heat necessary for cremation. This theory is forensically weak. Theory 2. They were kidnapped. The theory George and Jenny believed for the rest of their lives. The fire was arson, set deliberately as a diversion. While the fire raged, someone took the 5 children from the house. They were driven away, hidden, possibly taken out of state, possibly even smuggled to Italy. Supporting evidence. The missing ladder stolen to prevent rescue. The sabotaged truck's distributor caps were later found to have been removed, preventing the engines from starting. The cut phone lines confirmed by the phone company. The witness sightings of the children after the fire. The threats George received. This theory is supported by circumstantial evidence, but there's no physical proof. No confession. No bodies. No resolution. Theory 3: foul play and cover-up. A darker variation of Theory 2. The children were kidnapped. But instead of being taken away to be raised by others, they were murdered that night, killed before or during the fire, and their bodies were hidden elsewhere. Perhaps local authorities were complicit. Perhaps someone with power and influence orchestrated the crime and ensured it wouldn't be properly investigated. This would explain the delayed response of the fire department. 7 hours to travel 4 miles. The fire chief's quick dismissal of the case without a proper forensic investigation. The lack of follow-up on witness reports. But again, there's no concrete proof. George and Jenny Sauter refused to accept that their children were dead. They spent the rest of their lives searching. In 1949, they erected a massive billboard on Route 16, one of the main highways near Fayetteville, Georgia. The billboard showed large photographs of the 5 missing children, along with the text, "Have you seen these children?" Beneath the photos, details, names, ages, descriptions, and an offer. $10,000 reward for information leading to their whereabouts. The billboard stood for over 40 years. Tens of thousands of drivers passed it every week. It became a landmark, a haunting reminder. Tips came in, hundreds of them. Some sincere, some cruel hoaxes. George and Jenny followed every lead. They traveled across the country, chasing sightings. They hired private investigators. They consulted psychics. They never stopped looking. In 1968, 23 years after the fire, Jenny received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a photograph. A portrait of a young man, maybe in his mid-20s. Dark hair. Italian features. Strong resemblance to the Sauter family. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Louis Sauter, I love brother Frankie. The little boys." A 90,132. Jenny's heart nearly stopped. Louis. Her son. The message referenced Frankie, his brother. Was this Louis? Alive? Grown? Trying to reach out? Jenny hired private investigators to trace the photo. They tracked it to a city in Kentucky. But the trail went cold. No one could identify the man in the photo. No one knew who sent it. Forensic experts later examined the photo. They said the man bore a resemblance to what Louis Sauter might look like as an adult, but they couldn't confirm it was him. The photo remains one of the most tantalizing pieces of evidence in the case. Was it really Louis? Or was it a cruel hoax? We'll never know. George Sauter died in 1969 at the age of 74. He never learned what happened to his children. Jenny Sauter died in 1989 at the age of 95. She too died without answers. The billboard was taken down in the late 1980s, but the case has never been officially closed. To this day, no one knows if the 5 Sauter children died in the fire or were taken. Here's what we know for certain. The fire was suspicious. Multiple signs. The ladder was stolen. The trucks were sabotaged. The phone lines were cut. No human remains, none, were found in the debris. Multiple credible witnesses reported seeing the children alive after the fire. George Sauter had been threatened in the months before the fire. The paranormal theory that the children were taken by some supernatural force, or that they vanished into another dimension, is nonsense. But the human reality is just as terrifying. If the children were kidnapped, they would have been separated, hidden, placed with families far from West Virginia, given new names, new identities, raised to forget who they were. They might have lived full lives, never knowing they were stolen. They might have had children of their own. Grandchildren, daughter, great-grandchildren. They might have died old, peaceful, surrounded by loved ones, never remembering the name Sauter. Or they might have died that night. Victims of violence. Victims of a conspiracy. Their bodies hidden in a place no one has ever thought to look. The Sauter children case is often told as a ghost story, a mystery wrapped in smoke and shadow. But it's not a ghost story. It's a crime that was never solved, never prosecuted, never answered. And somewhere, in a grave, or in a family photo album, or in the fading memory of someone very old, the truth is waiting.